Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to your first Algebra 2 lesson. So, today we're going to be talking about evaluating and simplifying expressions, and this is 1.1. So just so you know, this is an indicator here of the module we're on and the section within that module. This number indicates the module that we're in, and these modules correspond to the module on your eCampus page. And this is the section we're in, the first section. So our central question today is, how do you know when an algebraic expression is in simplest form? And our learning goal will be to use the order of operations to evaluate expressions. So you may have heard of order of operations using PEMDAS, but we're going to talk about GEMDAS, which is essentially the same thing. So the G, instead of parentheses, stands for grouping. And the reason we use G instead of P is because it's more inclusive of other types of grouping. So parentheses is one type of grouping, but we can also have brackets, braces, absolute values, roots, and division bar. Now when we're talking about a division bar, this can indicate division, but it also can indicate that we're separating two sections of expressions that are considered a pair of grouping. Next would be exponents. And then step 3 is multiplication and division. So the reason that these are what we call from left to right is because when you encounter either of these operations in an expression that you're evaluating, you're going to go from left to right. So they're equal, they're at an equal level with each other. That means that if you encounter the division before you can encounter the multiplication, and you're at that level and you're going through the problem, you're going to do the division first in some cases. So it doesn't always have to go M then D. Sometimes these are interchangeable. So we always go from left to right with these. These are equal operations. And same goes for addition and subtraction, which are also equal operations. So when you encounter these, and these are all that you have left in your problem to complete, you're going to go from left to right. So why do we work from left to right? Well, multiplication and division rank equally as operations. So if division is before the multiplication, you divide first. Same holds for addition and subtraction. So essentially what I just talked about. So we'll see some examples with that, and that will help clear up any confusion you might have. So the first question says simplify, and we're given an expression to simplify. Now the first thing we want to look at is the grouping. So you can see here that we have some brackets on the outside here, and then we have some parentheses within the brackets. So that means we're going to be working within the brackets first before we do any of the division on the outside. So we're going to work in the brackets, and you'll notice inside the brackets there's even more grouping. So that means we're going to start here. So we're going to work our inside to the outside. So we start inside the grouping, and then within the grouping, there's grouping that we're going to do first. So within the grouping, we have addition and we have an exponent. Now we know E comes before addition in GEMDAS or PEMDAS, so we're going to evaluate the exponent first. So 6 to the second power is 6 times 6, which is 36. And now we can move on to the next step, which again, we're still at the grouping section. We haven't finished this grouping yet. So we went inside the grouping. So you're going to be doing order of operations within the order of operations, sometimes within the order of operations. So you're going to work inside out. So here we're going to end up with 18 minus, now we're going to add these together. That becomes 40 divided by 2. Now we're at the stage where we have some grouping, which are brackets in the form of brackets, and then we have division. We know grouping comes before division. So the idea here is grouping overrides the rule that subtraction comes after division, because the grouping tells us we need to do that first. So we do 18 minus 40, which is negative 22, divided by 2. So now we're just left with negative 11. And that would be your simplified expression. So over here, we talked about a division bar that separates expressions. So that means we're going to work on these separately as two separate entities, and then once we get down to a number on the top and bottom, then we can simplify using division. So I'm going to start with the top. Now as you can see, there is some grouping in the top, so we're going to work there first. So that gives me 2 times 15, and then down here I'm left with -5. That gives me 30 over -5. Now that we've simplified both of these down to numbers, we can evaluate that, and we get -6. And that would be our simplified expression here. Now you'll notice down here, we're working with an expression, but the expression does have some variables in it, which means that we may not be able to fully simplify it down to a number in all cases. But we're going to simplify as much as we can. We're going to use order of operations, and then we're going to combine like terms. So, looking at what I can work with here. Well, we have some grouping. Now, in the grouping, you'll see that we have two unlike terms, meaning we cannot combine these terms. So we're going to have to use the distributive property. So we're going to use the distributive property because the distributive property is a form of multiplication. And you'll notice all we have left in here is addition, other than the grouping. We can't do the grouping, we can't do anything with that. So we're going to go on to multiplication, and distributive property is a form of that. So we're going to multiply. 18x plus 6y, and then we're multiplying 1/3 times 12y, that's going to be 4y, and that's going to be minus 6x. Now we're to the stage where we have all addition and subtraction, so we're going to work from left to right. So if I try to do that, these two I cannot combine because they're not like terms, but I can combine these two. So I'm left with 18x plus 10y minus 6x. Now once again, I can't combine these, so I'm going to move on. I can't combine these either, so I'm going to combine these two because they're all of equal operation. So that's going to give me 12x plus 10y. And this would be our expression simplified as much as we possibly can simplify it. So over here, we're going to talk about the grouping that is denoted by the division bar. So you'll notice there's grouping on the top and the bottom, but within each of the grouping there is a product between the number and the variable, neither of which can be simplified. So we're going to move on to our next set of operations, well, exponents. We don't have any exponents, so we're going to go on to multiplication and division. Now we do have multiplication in the form of the distributive property. So we're going to distribute here, and we end up with 10x minus 2x plus 4 plus 5. Once again, down here, we're going to do the distributive property. So we end up with 4x minus 15x. Now we're going to combine like terms in the numerator and the denominator. So that leaves me with 8x plus 9 all over, well, that's 4 minus 15, which is negative 11x. And that would be our simplified expression. Now we have a few more examples, and then you're going to have a chance to try this on your own and practice. So in the numerator here and the denominator, we don't have any variables, so we're going to be able to fully simplify this. So we're going to work with our grouping first, of course, because that comes first in GEMDAS. So I'm going to work with my grouping from left to right. So this becomes 9. Now here, I have grouping, and then I'm going to square the grouping. So you can either do that right now, or we can write it out in a separate step. So that's going to be 3 to the second power minus, now we have inside of this grouping, we have some division and multiplication. Now remember, multiplication and division are equal operations, so we go from left to right. So we're going to do the division first. So that ends up being 16 divided by 2 is 8. 8 times 4 is 32. And then on the bottom, we're going to do the grouping first. So we have 42 divided by 3. That's 14 divided by 2. So now we can simplify this further. We end up with 9 times 9 minus 32 over 7. 9 times 9 is 81, and then 81 minus 32 is 49 divided by 7. I just simplified here by multiplying and then subtracting, because order of operations, multiplication comes before subtraction. And then I end up with 7 as my simplified expression. And here it says evaluate 3x squared plus x times y minus 5 if x is 3 and y is 4. Now, you can do this two ways. You can plug in the numbers first, use substitution for the variables, or you can simplify this first and then plug the numbers in. So I'm going to show you both ways so that you have an idea, but both ways would be correct. So let's go ahead and simplify this expression if possible before we plug any numbers in. Now it's very well that sometimes you actually can't simplify it further, so then you're just going to go ahead and plug in the numbers, but I do want to see if that's possible here. So we end up with 3x squared plus, I'm going to use the distributive property here because we have a variable, so that's going to be xy minus 5x. Now I'm looking at this and I see we don't have any like terms, so this is as simplified as it's possibly going to be. So now I'm going to plug in my variables, the values for them. So that's going to be 3 times 3 squared plus 3 times 4 minus 5 times 3. Now I'm going to use order of operations again, so we know that grouping comes first. Well, the grouping that I put in is really just an indicator of multiplication, and there's nothing I can do inside the parentheses here, so I'm going to go ahead and do the exponent. So that's going to be 3 times 9, and I'm going to do the multiplication here, plus 12 minus 15, complete the multiplication. So we have 27 plus 12 minus 15. Now I go from left to right, so 27 plus 12 minus 15, that gives me 24. So now we can check and see if we plug in first and then simplify if we're going to get the same answer. In reality we should, but mistakes can happen, so it's a good idea to check. So I'm just plugging everything in, all the variables. And now I'm going to simplify, so I'm going to do my grouping first. In this case, my grouping, there's nothing I can do inside, but I can do something over here, so I get 3 times 3 to the second power plus 3 times, this is going to be a -1. So now I'm going to do my exponents, 3 times 9. Now I can do my multiplication, but we'll leave it as a separate step. And now I'm going to multiply each of these, so we get 27. And then we get a -3, so we get 27 minus 3, which is 24. So as you can see, two ways of doing this correctly. You can simplify first, or you can plug in and then simplify if you're working with variables. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You guys know all the ways to do it now, as I've went through it with you by the time you're watching this. So have a great day, and yeah.